How's it going? Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm Rob Whiteside. Tonight, we've got a very special movie that we're going to be talking about. It's one of the Disney full-length animated features. And you know what? I found one of the biggest fans of this movie I could find, and it's Katie from Disneyland News Today. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing good. You know, it was surprising, again, that this was one of those movies that was on your ticker list, was The Great Mouse Detective. And, you know, Disney Plus has a lot of content, obviously, and we've been trying to go through all of it and go deep into some of the stuff that maybe people wouldn't have picked up the first time that they pulled up Disney Plus. And so The Great Mouse Detective was one that you mentioned, and I was like, you know what, I feel like that's an underrated Disney movie. It's from a really weird time in Disney animated history. It's 1986, which way before your time. So what is it that draws you to this movie?
This was one of those films that I watched so much as a kid that I always thought was popular, and I would talk about it and no one knew what I was talking about. It seemed like it was a classic Disney movie to me. So growing up and watching it now, especially rewatching it before doing this review, it is a little obscure. It is weird. It's on the shorter side of a Disney animated feature, but I think the characters are great. I think the storyline is great. I don't know. I think it deserves a place in the Disney library.
Yeah, for sure. So this is one that, you know, again, it comes at a very weird time because this is 1986. 1989 is 3 years away and kind of the beginning of the renaissance of Disney animation with The Little Mermaid, the whole musical and princesses, vibe time. But after some weird stuff like The Black Cauldron and what's the other thing I'm thinking of? Copper Todd. Fox and the Hound. There it is. Yeah,
Yes.
and so those movies are they're kind of sleepers because the animation wasn't over the top. It wasn't the old school Disney animation. It was some of this new generation of animation. So this one, and then Oliver and Company, and then you've got the Rescuers Down Under coming up soon. But it all kind of kicks off in 1989 with The Little Mermaid. So this predates all of that. And it's honestly a fun little story because it's like a story based on a story that's based on a story, right? So
Right.
it's Basil of Baker Street, which is a book series about a mouse who is a detective who basically patterns his life after Sherlock Holmes. So this is Sherlock Holmes being emulated by a book series being emulated by Disney. So that's kind of fun. I mean, on the surface, if you didn't know about the Basil of Baker Street series, it would feel like it was just a Sherlock Holmes ripoff, right?
Right.
I
And
mean,
they kind of hint at
homage.
it. Homage, right. They kind of hint at it throughout the film, like in the beginning you see Basil on Baker Street, his little house, and you see Sherlock Holmes in the windows above and they're running through the house. And then in the final scene when they pull away, he's reading in the chair. So they make it obvious that it's based off Sherlock Holmes. I'm pretty sure people can tell. But it is a little subtle.
Yeah. So one of the things about that is that they kind of try to continually trick you about it because it's like you see the carriage with, you know, Dr. Watson in it, and then you feel like, oh, this is a story about him, and then they slowly pan down, and it's Dr. Dawson underneath the carriage that we're really hearing from. And then even when they decide to go to Baker Street, once Dr. Dawson meets Olivia, they go to Baker Street, and then again you see the shadow of Sherlock in the window, but no, we're not here for him. We pan down to, like, you know, the
Around the
little mouse
house.
hole, and we're going to see the mouse version of him, which brings up this weird thing before we get into the whole story is that there's the anthropomorphic animals in this that they dress in the clothes, they talk, and they're
Yes.
living alongside of humans, which doesn't happen all that much, I don't feel like. I feel like in most cases it's Zootopia, where it's all animals that just act like humans, or it's something like the 101 Dalmatians, where it's dogs acting as dogs, they just communicate with each other.
Right. Well, it reminds me of The Rescuers, and The Rescuers is like top favorite Disney animation. I think my favorite's Pinocchio, but I still love The Rescuers, and I don't know if it's just mice. I mean, Disney obviously knows how to animate mice. Mickey was the lead of the show for so long, but this one, it kind of reminds me of The Rescuers, how they're all dressed up, and they somehow are like aware that humans exist, and they're walking around, but they can still exist in their own world. So that's what it kind of reminds me of.
So when the story opens up, we're opening up with this Mr. Flaversham who is in his toy shop and he's making this cool thing for his daughter, and then this horrible thing happens where this evil bat comes and he like rips away Flaversham, and he hides his daughter Olivia in a cupboard, and then like just disaster. And then they're like, oh, okay, cut to credits. So like this is a kind of an intense start, I feel like, to a
Right.
children's movie. And it's
I
G.
was
It's not rated PG, it's G.
Yeah. I was thinking this as well because it's so like the lightning is striking and it's the shadows and it's intense and then you hear the upbeat Great Mouse Detective intro immediately.
Great Mouse Detective. Yeah, so I'm feeling all over the place about this. I'm trying to stay focused on the fact we'll get to the music, we'll get to the voices because I want to talk about all that stuff. But it's, once the story continues on, you see Dr. Dawson, and it's the same intro that Dr. Watson has in every Sherlock movie or the Sherlock TV series. Him just looking for a place, he stumbles upon Sherlock, etc. He stumbles upon Olivia, and Olivia is looking for Basil of Baker Street because she's read this article that says that he's the greatest detective, and so we have to find him so she can find her dad. She has no idea what's happening. It's dark, it's raining. Dr. Dawson feels bad for her, takes her under his wing, and they go to Baker Street. When they get there, they meet the housekeeper. They go inside. She offers them some cheese crumpets, which again, very mouse-like. And
Yes.
then here comes Basil in with his grand entrance in, I feel like, a slightly offensive Asian costume.
Yeah, it definitely is. And then he like deflates himself and steps out of it. So obviously it was just like some persona he was in for some mission he was on. But yeah, I thought I double checked that one too.
Yeah, and so then he does his own ballistics thing, and he's kind of, again, very much like Sherlock. He's kind of doesn't really have an awareness of the people around him. He's just kind of his own world. Doesn't really, acknowledge Dr. Dawson, but he starts talking to him, and the little girl's there, and he doesn't really listen to her. And he's doing his own ballistics test and firing a gun into these three pillows that he actually held up for Dawson to hold, who then quickly realizes this is a bad idea, and he throws him down. So he's just very disjointed, and again, in very much in the same way we see Sherlock always portrayed. So again, we're talking about Basil, but it's really a mouse version of Sherlock Holmes. He's got the chemistry set. He's doing everything, all these weird like gadgets in his house where he's fixed up to try to do different things, and it's really kind of cool to see all that together. And then meanwhile there's this little girl and she's got a problem, but he doesn't want to deal with that until he realizes that it's connected to his case to foil the evil Ratigan. So
Then he
you got to have
figures.
the evil villain.
Right. And I think one of the greatest Disney villains.
He's pretty
I
good.
He's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll give you that. But so, in this one, I mean, he's no Moriarty. Moriarty's a little bit darker, but maybe not. I don't know. But again, Disney-wise, yes, he's a pretty good villain. And honestly, I think all of these characters are kind of underused in Disney. And to your
For
point,
sure.
very, very like kind of an overlooked movie, which is why we talk about it here. But I'd love to see these characters fleshed out more, and we'll again talk about that near the end. So, now we've got, Basil has met Dr. Dawson. He's got Olivia. He's realized that when she says this bat with a peg leg took my dad, which who hasn't said that a million times, has gone, she goes in and he's like, oh, wait a minute, this is connected to Ratigan. And so then they kind of pan into Ratigan's picture, which for some reason he has in his house. And
Yeah.
it's not just like sticking on a dartboard, it's like framed.
Yeah, it's like this beautiful picture of him, portrait.
Holding his nemesis up to on a
Yeah.
pedestal. So then they cut to him. They cut to Flavisham, who's been kidnapped. Olivia's dad, working in this little like tight area, and he's working on a robot. And it's one of those things that I don't think you pay attention to what the robot is until like the end. And so like rewatching this movie, I'm like, oh, I know what that is.
Right.
And he's having having him practice tea. I'm sure this is the same thing that WDI always does with their animatronics, just has them practicing pouring tea, things like that. And then, we find out that Ratigan has this evil plan. Flavisham doesn't want to help him. And so he's like, I need to get some insurance. So he sends the bat Fidget off to capture Olivia, sends him with a grocery list. And one of the things on it just happens to be girl. So, and Fidget doesn't seem like the brightest bulb in the batch. So the idea that he just is
No.
going to go with this list and go, yep, girl, I know what that is, seems a little bit off. But yeah. So
Yeah.
Ratigan at this point decides to do a big musical number, and kind of explain himself. And
Yeah.
again, it gets sort of dark because there's a
Yeah.
drunk mouse, which again, kids movie, and they're like kind of like
I
romanticizing
know.
like the little drunk mouse.
That
What?
was one thing, definitely like watching this now. There's guns, alcohol, smoking, cultural appropriation. There's a lot in this film.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think if you go deep enough, you're going to find something everywhere. But I mean, in this
Yeah.
one, it does. I do think that a rating of G, like holding up today, seems a little bit weird, um,
Yes.
because of all of the danger and all of the just intensity and darkness and some of the things that it does. Doesn't mean it's still not a good movie, but I feel like it needs a little bit more warning than that. Than, oh, by the way, there's smoking in this.
Especially because there are so many warnings on so many of these films, even The Muppet Show on Disney Plus. I was surprised. I didn't see a warning. I hope I didn't miss it.
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't the same type of warning that we've seen in other things. So, like,
Yeah.
it wasn't in your face, I didn't think. So I'd have to go back and look at it. But yeah, it just seems like there was a lot in here. And again, it was 1996. I mean, 1986.
Yeah,
It
it was the
wasn't like,
80s.
yeah, it wasn't 1940 though. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what a lot of the stuff like, the Three Caballeros, I think actually has a still frame warning kind of a thing that says, this is, probably culturally inappropriate. We apologize, and again, I love that Disney Plus gives you the real versions,
Yes.
of things, but they do need to put some of that warning on there because I do think it's just a tad bit intense. Because from the pictures, you got Toby, the cool dog, you got the little girl mouse. You're like, this, hey, let's just put the kid in front of the TV for screen time and go do something else. I mean, it's rated G. It's all good. There's like an axe. There's an evil rat. There's an anvil falling on something. There's peril. There's a little girl getting kidnapped and shoved in a bottle. I mean, it's
But then you watch the drunk mouse get eaten. So,
yeah. So back to the drunk mouse. Good, yeah,
yes.
good circle back. I mean, he's there. He like calls Ratigan a rat, but he doesn't really know what he's doing. And Ratigan is like, "No, you're not going to call me a rat." Wherein he clearly is. He's got a long rat tail. He's bigger than all the other mice. He goes by the name of Ratigan. I feel like if that is a trigger for you, don't call yourself Ratigan.
Yeah,
And I think there was a
that's fun.
similar thing in American Tail, wasn't there? With like a cat that was pretending to be. Maybe I'm
I
off
have
on
not
that.
seen that one in so
Been a
long.
million years since I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
But speaking of other movies, I do think when I look at Fidget, the bat from this, I start to think of Bartok from Anastasia, who was, they look very similar with the, I mean, I guess they're very similar because they're bats, but it's just, they look very similar in there in the way that
Yeah.
they portray them. So the best known song in this one is the Ratigan song, to me anyway. That's the one that, like, when you mention this movie, I hear it in my head. Like them kind of
Really?
swaying back and forth and Ratigan. And, God bless the guy that's got his own theme music. That's kind of awesome.
Yeah. I
So he's singing the song. Drunk Mouse calls him a rat. He's like, you know what? Let's talk outside. I gotta have a talk with you. Takes him outside, rings a little bell. Cat comes up, sneaks up from behind him, and eats him. Now they do that off camera, but the cat eats the mouse,
Oh, she
which
like
again
licks
they
her
build up
lips.
as what's that?
She like it's a whole scene. She's like very happy with the mouse.
But I mean, it's pretty intense, right? I mean, it's like all the other mice kind of bow their
I
heads and
don't.
hold their hats, and I mean, it's.
Yeah, I
Am
don't
I
know why
wrong?
they had
I'm
to make
making
him
too
so
much of this, am
cute.
I?
I don't know. No, I thought it was a little funny. I just don't know why they had to make the little drunk mouse so cute if they were gonna have it be eaten by the cat. No, I don't want to see a cute little animal get eaten.
No, that's true. So Felicia eats Bartholomew,
Yes.
and then
Also,
they go
that's
ahead.
this is probably one of the only. I mean, there was this whole new like Disney cat and dog line that came to the parks recently, and I was looking at it, and I think she's the only Disney cat I know that wasn't represented on anything. Same, I don't really see Toby on much.
I was thinking that too. but again, that goes back to
Yeah.
representation of these characters in parks and merchandise and things like that. It does feel like there should be more of that. It feels like a good line for the UK pavilion at Epcot. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they like Toby's adorable. Like I don't know why there's not
Yeah.
more Toby stuff out there. He's
I
just
love the poster, the like original white poster, and Toby's like the biggest character on it.
yeah. No, I agree. And Toby is like at this point we haven't met Toby yet. Like they're going through the whole Ratigan thing, where he, the mouse gets eaten,
Drew
and
said,
then
would it matter if the animal wasn't cute? Yes, it would still matter, but it just makes it worse that Bartholomew was so cute.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Uh, and the streets are filled with cheese. Are we talking about, in the chat? Are they talking about An American Tail? And there are no cats
Yes.
in America. Okay, all right, great. Anyway, so we'll keep talking about this one. So they cut back, they pan back out, and it's kind of very cinematic. They pan back out of the Ratigan picture in Basil's house, and we're back to Olivia and her problems, and he's like, we're gonna go and figure out like how to get him. And so what has happened is when all this has been happening, Fidget comes to the house and tries to get Olivia, and they chase him away, but he leaves his hat behind. So Basil's like, "Great, I got a way to get him now. Let me go get my boy Toby, and he's gonna track him down for us." So at this point, they're not really saying who Toby is, but I don't know. Do we assume that Toby's a dog at this point?
I always thought that Toby's Sherlock's dog, right? That's the whole thing.
That would be my assumption, yes.
Okay. That's what I thought too.
So they all go and they talk with Toby, and Toby doesn't particularly like Dr. Dawson. They meet up with Toby, and they have him smell the hat because he's the best sniffer that Basil has ever trained. And then, he makes fast friends with Olivia, but he's adorable. I mean, he's great. Like, he reminds me a little bit of Chief from The Fox and the Hound. But he doesn't talk. He's just adorable. Which is another question. Like, why doesn't Toby talk? The mice talk. Why doesn't Toby talk?
Maybe because he's a domestic dog. He's maybe
I don't buy it.
I don't
Nope.
buy it. He should, because in Lady and the Tramp they all talk.
So he doesn't talk, and the cat doesn't talk either. But the mice
Yeah.
do.
I know, weird. I guess I didn't notice that.
So anyway, they get Toby. Toby sniffs the hat and then tracks him down. They go track down Fidget to a toy store, which is weird because they were in one when they took Flavisham, I guess. But they track him down to a toy store where he's gathering up all the stuff off his list. And so they make it really, really easy for him to just like, oh, let me go ahead and hand you the girl too, because that was on the list, so we can get that taken care
Yeah.
of. But there's a lot of these things that, again, go back to Basil being like Sherlock. There's a little teeny tiny hole, and he's like, this is where he went in, and Dawson's like, no, he couldn't fit through there, and he takes Dawson's finger and pushes it in, and it pulls out, and he sees that it's a door. And the same thing when Dawson first shows up, and he's like, "Oh, you were a doctor in the Afghan war," and he's like, "What? How do you know all that?" And he just he
Yeah.
walks through it. And I think that every Sherlock story establishes that, like, he's just really great at deducing things and observing things, and so Basil is the same.
Yeah.
So they go off and they have this run-in with Fidget as he's I just keep saying Fidget, and I keep thinking fidget spinner. I don't know. I can't get that out of my head.
But
It's a
to
really
that.
weird name for
There
this
was,
bat.
as much as we don't see merchandise for them or representation in the parks, they did have Fidget was the Disneyland. I don't know if it was Disney World too, but the Disneyland Halloween pin this year.
Really?
Yeah, so that
Okay.
was cool. I forgot about that. So maybe a little
Um,
representation every so
no,
often.
that makes sense. So there's this huge toy store, and it's really cool. But what I love in here is there's an Easter egg, and the Easter egg is, I guess Fidget turns on all the devices in the toy store, and he starts to lure Olivia away with bubbles. And when she turns the corner and she looks at the bubbles, they're being blown by Dumbo. Which I don't feel like they did a lot of the whole Easter egg thing back in the day.
Yeah, I guess. I wasn't even that surprised by it. It didn't really stand out to me, actually. So good
Oh,
catch.
sorry.
No, I'm
Um,
sorry. I should
I
have
mean, like,
noticed. I'm disappointed
Lilo
in
and
myself.
Stitch, Lilo and Stitch is a ton, but I think that the more the animation, like the later we get past this point in animation, there is really kind of a reverence for the early animation. The guys who are drawing these things have a real respect for the things that came before them. Um,
And I mean, Eric Larson, who was one of the original Nine Old Men, had actually worked on this film too. So it does, to me, it feels so Disney to me. Like it has the Disney heart in it. So seeing little pop-ups like that throughout the film, it's kind of cool. It makes sense.
yeah. So then, so you know, they lose Olivia here, and Fidget gets away with Olivia. Um, Basil starts to lose hope. They find this note, the grocery list. He has a plan to try and get him back, or to get her back. And then, you know, Fidget takes all of his goods to Ratigan to check in with him. Ratigan's super happy with him until he realizes he lost the note. And then he's like, as this smart, evil villain, he's like, oh, wait a minute. This is great because we'll lure Basil here. So like for a minute he's mad at Fidget and he actually feeds Fidget to the cat.
Yeah.
But then Fidget fights his way out. So in that particular case, it's sort of comedic, whereas when they did it to the little mouse earlier, it was just really dark. And I don't know why that's different. I guess because you knew that he was going to survive because of the way like he's pounding around in her stomach and in her mouth.
He's
I
just
don't.
like the comic relief of the film,
Yeah, I
I
guess so.
guess.
I guess so at that point.
Yeah.
So they're getting ready for Basil, and so I kind of want to stop here and talk about like the actors because you talked about what a great villain Ratigan is, and he's voiced by Vincent Price, who was
The one and
amazing in
only.
this role.
Yes.
And then he also was the voice of the narrator in Phantom Manor in the original one in Paris, which was very cool. And I was trying to like put the timeline together to see if like he could have voiced them at the same time because that opened in 1992. This was finished in '86.
Yeah.
Maybe they just really liked having him there. But also Vincent Price was really known for the over the top creepy, Michael Jackson's Thriller, things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
Vincent Price, I think D23 did an interview with him where he was talking about how he always wanted to be in an animated film and how he loved Ratigan. He thought Ratigan was a great villain. He was so excited to do the voice for this. And it's Vincent Price is like that. He can do anything. He can be in films, television, animation, anything. So I think he does a great job actually voicing this. I think he adds so much character to Ratigan. I love him as a villain. I think he's great.
um, so then let's talk about another voice from here is Alan Young.
Yes, this,
So
he was one that I was watching this back today, and for the first time I was like, Alan Young, this all makes sense. Why did I never know this?
right. So before I go on, Dawn just said, I love Vincent Price, especially on the Brady Bunch Hawaii.
Yeah, Vincent Price does everything.
Ah, great. That's so good. Oh, thanks, Don. Anyway, so when they first open up, it's with Flavisham and his daughter. And as soon as I heard Flavisham, I was like, Scrooge McDuck.
Scrooge,
He's
right.
he's Scrooge. He was like Scrooge, I think, for 30 years, but he was Scrooge in Mickey's Christmas Carol, which is probably the most recent thing with Scrooge McDuck that I've seen in it.
He,
And then Dawn's yelling like in the chat, Wilbur. And then that's the thing I didn't realize is that he was Wilbur on the Mr. Ed black and white TV show.
yeah, he was on Mr. Ed.
I didn't know, and
He's,
like, yeah, like I don't picture that, especially because he seemed like all American there, where he seems like sort of Scottish when he's Scrooge McDuck, and he's kind of the same with Flavisham, like
yeah.
an English Scottish thing. But he was born in England and then lived in Canada and then lived in the U.S. So I guess he only was in England for a little while. But now that I've seen it, and I like see the picture of him, I can see it now. Whereas
Yeah.
before, like all I could hear was Scrooge.
I was doing some research on it too, because I mean, I haven't watched this since I was so young, and I'm looking back, and he was honestly the thing I was most interested to learn about after watching it, only because he had a very long life and he had a very long career with Disney. Actually, the latest thing he had worked on was the Mickey Mouse cartoons, the new ones that have been on Disney Channel. Even though he passed away in 1916 or 2016, he had still worked on those. So it was awesome to see that even from Great Mouse Detective, he had still been working with Disney till his final days, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think he died at 96. I think I saw
96.
somewhere.
He was born in 1919 and then died in 2016.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that threw me off. Like I wouldn't have known him other than that, but I was just really, I don't know. I thought that was a really cool thing because I don't think there are a lot of famous people in this movie in general. I mean, not to me anyway. I mean, obviously, you've got Vincent Price in here, who is kind of like sort of top bill, and then you have Alan Young, and then when they are on the trail to try to find Ratigan, not knowing they're being lured into a trap, they go to a little like sleazy pub down by the wharf. And in there's a mouse who starts singing, and then it turns into sort of a mouse burlesque show.
Yeah. Which everyone wants to see.
No, no. Again, so what I didn't realize at the time was the song was performed, and the character, I guess, performed by Melissa Manchester, the singer. So there's a making of attached to this on Disney Plus, which I just want to say, I feel like Disney Plus doesn't do enough of this. There's so much content on DVDs out there that why couldn't they just take that content and add it? It doesn't really seem like it would cost them a lot. The content exists already. Most of the things that we go back and do on Deep in the Plus, Darby O'Gill and the Little People, things like that, there's really like nothing. There's maybe either a trailer or even in some cases not a trailer, they just feature what's called a clip. And just, I guess, to give you a taste of it, but a taste or a touch of Disney, a taste of Disney, it's fine. So they go back in and they have the trailer, but they also have this 8-minute making of, and in the making of is Melissa Manchester, full out 80s, like the hair, her outfit, like she's just full out 80s. And she was talking about how I guess they picked up a lot of the mannerisms, and I don't know if I was like shaking it or not, but I guess maybe I was because they picked up on it, and I was like, what is happening right now? I don't know. It was just a weird thing.
I loved watching it because I know it's not something I would see in a Disney film today. Like, this is something that will probably not be normalized in Disney animation again, I'm sure, or at least for a very long time. So watching this now and not being a kid, I can't believe I watched this as a kid. It's literally a burlesque show. They start fighting. She's stripping on stage somewhat for a mouse, but I love it. I think it's fun.
Yeah, no, and I'm reading through the chat again, and Drew says, I like when movies don't have a lot of famous people. It makes it more immersive. I agree to that.
I agree.
I don't think it has to have somebody huge attached to it, especially the stuff on
That's
Disney
all.
Plus.
Animation has, this is one of my things, is I love animation. I love it so much, and the thing I've been seeing so much in DreamWorks and in Disney lately is it's all celebrities. They put these people in these films specifically so people come and see them.
Yep.
And I agree. I would rather not know all the actors. I like going back and learning, and like with Alan Young today, going back to see what else he's been in and connecting it, especially because Disney used to reuse a lot of their same voice actors for films. So it's always fun
Yep.
connecting. But it was fun that they were famous from the films, not just as a popularity grab for theaters.
Yeah, and again, I think voice actors are like stars unto themselves, but because they're voice actors,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have an image of them when you watch the B movie, which I don't know why you would, but no hate towards it, but I'm just saying, all you see is, or you just hear Jerry Seinfeld the whole time. Like that's just Jerry
Right.
Seinfeld, and so I think it's obvious why he doesn't do a lot of voice work is because he's so like famous as his own voice, whereas some other people can get away with it a little bit more. But I love like Frank Welker, who does so many voices. Like, you know, June Foray did so many voices. Like, I love knowing about those people because I didn't really have a visual of them in my head when they were doing that stuff. It's just that, you know, maybe I knew their name, didn't really like think of them as, you know, as actors. I thought of them as characters. And again, I think as voice actors, they probably have more range. So you know, you can get lost a little bit in, you know, realizing who they are. So Drew, I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens next is there's a bar fight because again, every good Disney movie has to have one. No. So in this fight, Fidget makes his way out of the bar. In, you know, and Basil sees the whole thing happen. During this time, they had asked about Ratigan. Their beers were poisoned. He knew that was the case, but Dawson didn't and drank his, and so he's out of it. So he's kind of got to carry him. And they go through this like hole in the floor. They get down in the sewers. They go through the pipes. I thought it was an interesting choice that instead of animating them going through through the pipe and seeing their point of view, they show the outside of the pipe for a good 30 seconds to a minute, just like panning up the pipe, and you hear their voices going up. So that was an interesting choice.
Definitely, this movie is a little bit more on the cinematic side for Disney animation. Like the way that they lay out the scenes, just as you mentioned earlier, how they panned to the Ratigan portrait and then told his story, and then it panned back out from that portrait into the different story with Olivia. So I'm in film right now in school, so like connecting these things to animation, it's kind of interesting seeing how they pull stuff from maybe what they were working on in the live animation, that part of the studio, pulling it into the regular animation. It's interesting. I thought this film was very heavy in that.
Yeah.
Also, we passed it, but that is the song I think is the best when they are locked up, right? And I think they're in the sewer. The Goodbye So Long with Ratigan.
Oh no, we're not there yet.
Oh no, because I'm too far ahead.
Yeah,
but
so
that song.
They get through the sewers, and Ratigan has set this trap for them, which I think is very kind of funny, the way that they unfurl the whole thing. So when they get there, and I'm gonna show this here. Hold on a second. So they get there. And Ratigan, of course, has a big R on his hideout, which is the best kind of hideout when you can, you know, when you've got your logo on there. They're sneaking around. They think that they've got the upper hand. They see, you know, what they think is Olivia hiding in the bottle. Now, why she had to be in the bottle because they've never been here before, I don't know. That's really them fooling us and not Basil, right? Because you know, nobody knew that. And so, like, turns around. That's creepy. That's freaking creepy right there. And, you know, and so they're like, hey, look, we lured you here, and, you know, bravo, you finally made it, but you made it about 15 minutes later than I thought you would. But it's just, that whole scene is just super, like, with Fidget in the little girl costume. Why did that have to happen? Like, why? I don't know. They could have just snuck up on him, I guess. I don't know. It seems unnecessary, but...
That's what I'm saying. I think this film, it feels like they had been planning these scenes as it was a live action movie, and they just made it animation, because that's something you would do in a live action movie. It would be someone else in the outfit.
Okay, well, here's a question for you. Does this need to be made live action?
As mice?
Well, I mean, again, Disney has remade how many movies now? Because we've had a remake of Mulan, and we're supposed to have one of Little Mermaid, and we've got Cruella, which is sort of a remake, and there was already 101 Dalmatians. Does this need a remake in a real-world setting?
As much as I'm not on board with most of the live action that Disney has been doing recently, I think this movie has such, like, an ominous, kind of mystery, such a weird, dark tone to it. I think it would be really cool as live action if they could figure out how to do the mice correctly.
So, would they look like cartoon mice made real, or would they look like Lady and the Tramp type of animal? Like, which way do you think they go?
This is my thing. I don't like either. I didn't like Lion King, and I didn't like Lady and the Tramp. So I wouldn't want them to be either of that. Maybe if they just redid the cartoon, you can just.
Well, one of the things we keep talking about with this is that with live action remakes is they should do it of movies that didn't really work the first time in animation. Atlantis is a definite one that
Yeah.
could be, a big blockbuster live action remake because it didn't. I mean, it's kind of one of those movies that we love, but the box office didn't love it. Like it was not
Yeah.
critically accepted. It was the box office didn't accept it. Same thing with Treasure Planet. Same thing with with probably Oliver and Company. There are a lot of them that were not huge successes that they could probably do a very good remake of. I just think you're right. It does get a little weird when we're talking about animals. I mean, there is supposed to be
Yeah.
a Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers live action-ish type of a thing. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe
Which
that could pave the
terrifies
way.
me. I'm scared to see Chip and Dale in live action. Like
It could be
terrified.
Sonic. Yeah. Oh, and the same thing with Stitch. I mean, Stitch could be Sonic. They could really mess that one up too. So I don't know. I think that with a movie that's like a huge blockbuster, big thing, like they don't need to do it. But with ones that were like overlooked IP like this one, I think
Especially,
it would be a good one. But they would just have to be super careful with the way they did it.
yeah.
I do
And
think
this
that
film
another
is
thing they could
short.
what.
This film is short. It's like an hour and 15 minutes.
And
I
I
feel
thought that
like
too.
there could be more.
Yeah, but I thought that too, and I was like, "Is this the shortest?" And I went and looked, and it's not the shortest. Do you know what the shortest Disney full-length animated feature is?
Is it Toad and Ichabod? Does that
No,
count as
it does, but that's not it.
Snow White?
Nope.
What is it? Now I'm interested.
Dumbo.
Oh, yeah, Dumbo. Dumbo's so short.
Yeah,
But Dumbo's like
but it,
perfect.
yeah, but Dumbo seems painfully long when you think about like the sadness part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an hour and 4 minutes. This one's an hour and 15. But I did think that too when I saw the runtime of an hour and 15 minutes. I thought this is super short. Is this the shortest Disney full-length animated feature ever? And apparently Dumbo holds that title. So there you go. Um, so let's jump back into the story for a second. So they decide to set this like very unnecessary trap for Basil, and it's classic James Bond, uh, villain kind of starts to monologue like they joke about in with Syndrome and The Incredibles. You got me monologuing. Let me tell you my whole plan, uh, and it's like he's got a gun, a crossbow, a hatchet, and an anvil, and a mousetrap, all aimed at him, and then it's all hooked up to a Victrola that's going to play a song that Ratigan himself has recorded as a goodbye song to Basil. And I think that's the biggest torture of them all for a villain to make a song that you have to hear before you die. I mean, right?
Right. He's the best.
He's the best. Good old Ratigan. What a guy. What a
He's
fella.
prepared.
Yeah.
He already has it printed on record for them too. So
Uh,
he put in a lot of work towards their killing for sure.
Yeah, Adam's saying that Ratigan wanted to kill Basil in an over-the-top fashion, and that's true. He did say, "Let me throw everything I've got at you," on there. But the other thing that happens is because Basil's been 15 minutes late, he's going to have to, go ahead with his plan and leave the plan, like leave the murder trap to go off on its own, which is always a key in a hero-villain situation, right?
Yeah.
So we don't still know Ratigan's full plan, but we know it has to do with the Queen because they're going to Buckingham Palace. We know it has to do with the soldiers because of all the outfits that Fidget stole that now his henchmen are wearing. And then this mysterious package that Flaversham's been working on forever to try to make that happen. Speaking of packages, before we go in any further, I've been very, very bribey towards people that because they all love unboxings. That if we get to 50 likes, that I'll unbox this vintage. I'm going to call it vintage Frozen Wishable. I know you and I did one with Small World last time, but so if we can get to 50 likes, we'll unbox that because people apparently love unboxing. I don't know, it's a thing.
We're at 29, guys. We can get to 50.
Yeah, we got to do it. We got to do
Light
it.
it up.
So light it up.
Yeah.
So at this point, Basil is just depressed. He feels like he's been beaten, he's been tricked, he's been outfoxed by a rat. And then he decides like he's just going to give up. And then in talking back and forth with Dr. Dawson, he gets this idea that he's going to set the trap off early. Meanwhile, Ratigan is taken off to Buckingham Palace in an airship. He's got an airship. The dude's got...
The only way
there's
that
a
rats
scene.
do.
Yeah, there's a scene where they're jewels. He's got an airship. I mean, that's the thing too, is when we're talking about these animals, they all have their own clothes. Which again, the dog and the cat are naked. These guys all have clothes on. So they've got their own clothes that are made at their size. They've got a lot of other things made at their size. Whereas things like An American Tail, they are foraging off of humans and using their things to make stuff. But this, there's some of that, but a lot of it is like they've got their own stuff. They've got their own queen who has her own palace. I mean, so it is really weird to try to figure out the rules of this world, but I don't know. Maybe it's all doll furniture.
It's interesting to me that they decided the rescuers were, I will talk about the rescuers all day, I apologize, but
That's right.
They were 1977, and this was 1986. It's crazy that within 10 years they decided to do another British mouse movie. Like, what a specific genre to jump back into. But the thing that really tied them together for me was the narration from the characters. And that's what I think makes these old animated films feel a little bit more live. It's because it feels like an actual story where I think it was in the beginning, he found the girl in the alley and she was sitting in the box and he's narrating his whole journey walking towards what he's going to do. And it feels like you're watching a real movie. So that was one thing that surprised me. But yeah, 2 British mice movies.
Feels like you're watching a real movie. I think animators would be a little bit offended that you don't see it as a real movie. I think you mean like a live action movie.
Live action.
Sorry.
Movie.
So Ratigan goes to the Queen, and he's going to he's brought this present for the Queen, and we finally figure out it's a robot. It's a robot of the Queen, and it looks just like the Queen, and so they're going to use this to replace the Queen so that she can, and you can see the wires that are there, which is very strange too. But I guess they're trying to make it realistic because it's still, the early times when you can't make a really good animatronic that's going to be free roaming. So they've figured this out so that the Queen can, or this fake Queen can make Ratigan like her royal helper, and then he gets to make all these rules, kind of like Jafar and the royal vizier, taking over the Sultan kind of a thing. He used mind powers. They used robots. It's a tale as old as time. So they kidnap the Queen. They're going to take her and feed her to the cat. That's established. And then Ratigan's going to use the Queen to introduce him to her court to say, hey, this guy's going to be in charge now. Meanwhile, Basil's going to set off the trap. He does. He sets it off in such a way that everything goes exactly as the plan, which is, again, very Sherlock Holmes. Thinking of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes, where he's kind of got all the 45-degree angles and things floating around his head of how everything's going to work. And when all of that kind of stuff goes off, he gets free. They free Flaversham. The free Olivia. Flaversham is still at the Queen's place running this robot. And then they go off to save the Queen. Basil saved the Queen. This is a lot. I mean, we're talking about, we just said, this is a very short movie. There's been a lot going on.
I had forgotten that after the Queen, like, they realized that they go in, the Queen is stuttering. Adam said it in the comments too. You think someone would notice that the Queen is stuttering. It is very obvious that this mouse queen is a robot. It is not the real Queen. But they take her, or Basil comes in, takes over, he starts voicing the Queen for Flaversham. Ratigan is done, they take him, and then I totally forgot about the whole clock scene at the end. You feel like the movie's over after that, but no, there's still unfinished business, and it goes on, I think, like at least 15 more minutes.
Yeah, it's got a final act. One thing I wanted to point out too is you were comparing this, and I was thinking it too about the rescuers, but you were comparing it to the rescuers. Toby comes to the rescue here, and this moment feels very rescuers to me, where they're gonna ride Toby, and he gets down and he makes
Yep.
he makes a stairway out
Just
of his
like
ear.
Bianca Bernard.
Yep, so that they can take off and go save the queen. But you're right. Like, you would think that once they foiled Ratigan, maybe it could be over, but there's still more, which, again, doesn't seem like it needs to be there, but it was an hour 15 movie, and, like, when they finally, like, kind of vanquish him, it's only like an hour in. So there's this huge scene where it's sort of, like you said, cinematic with them. You know, he gets in his airship, because, again, of course, he has an airship with his own logo on it. Crazy. And they go in this airship, and they've kidnapped Olivia, and they're taking her away. And so Basil and Dr. Dawson and Flavisham all make this sort of makeshift airship to chase after him. And then on the way there, they kind of run into him, and he runs into Big Ben and smashes into it, and now they're inside Big Ben. One of the things in the making of, and you and I talked about this right beforehand, is they use computer animation for what we're told is the first time in a Disney full-length animated feature to make the cogs inside of Big Ben, which is pretty cool.
I mean, you can tell it's computer generated when watching it. It obviously looks different from the rest of the film, which is kind of my thing. It's like, if you're only going to use CGI for the last like 5 to 10 minutes of it, it's quite obvious that the style is changing a little bit.
Yeah.
But also, they probably weren't ready to make a complete, fully computer generated film at this point.
No, that makes sense. But I thought I had heard at some point that like that Beauty and the Beast with the ballroom scene, that was like really the first computer generation. But and in this, it's very rough computer animation.
Yes.
But I want to kind of show it. So they're inside the clock. They start to pan inside the clock, and so once he wakes up in here, and what they talked about in the making of is that they can be, again, very cinematic in the way that cameras pan, and you can sort of get that vibe that this is computer animation, but it is very old school computer animation at this point. But that they get to pan around the scene, and you get to see, the inside of Big Ben is pretty cool. So this is kind of like the final act. Ratigan's got Olivia. Basil's holding on for his life because it's a mouse fighting a rat. I mean, it's not a fair fight. And he's also a pretty smart rat because he's outsmarted Basil. So he is able to get Olivia out. He gets her to the makeshift airship. They save Olivia, but then he and Ratigan fall. At this point, Ratigan's starting to look like a rat. He's starting to like he's changed because he's like lost his mind at this point because he just wants to kill Basil.
There was a scene that was almost like, it reminded like Hitchcocky almost, which makes sense. Vincent Price is in this film. I'm sure they wanted to make it as spooky as possible. But it was like 3 separate visual pans of his eyes getting more red with more veins and scarier. I was like, wow, this is not something we see normally in Disney villains today. Usually not that intense, but yeah, he definitely like turns into the actual sewer rat that he's intended to be.
Yeah, I think that this is the scene you're talking about. So he's caught in one of the gears. He's getting super angry. He's got the flash of shadows and up close in his eyes. Is that what you're saying? And then he starts to this still looks hand drawn, but when they go back inside, he goes off and he's going through there. It's just the flash of lights, and you can see more of his fur.
I don't know if it's just the tower, but it reminds me of Hunchback.
Yeah, I get that.
The weird, yeah.
And the final fights always happen in the rain, because it's got to add that sense of drama. But there's not one but 2 times where we think we've lost Basil because he falls. So again, very intense. But in the end, everything's happy. They're able to save Olivia. Ratigan falls to his death, we assume, has met his maker. And then you never really know, because with Moriarty, you never really know if he's really gone forever or not. There's always another backup plan. But,
Right.
you know, Flaversham has his daughter back. Dawson's going to stay. They get a new case. And, you know, they've actually kind of set it up for sort of a sequel at that point, because there's like a new case of, you know, a woman who comes to them for help. So at that point, I was thinking, okay, maybe if they do a live action, that would be cool. But what if this became a Disney Plus TV series? I mean, at that investors call that they did a while back, well, I guess it was like the end of last year, they rolled out a ton of animated series based on full-length animated features. I feel like this could have been one.
Yes, I agree. I honestly, like, I always leaned away from the series for the longest time, but now that I'm seeing series get more popular, and I think they're being done well now. I think for a long time, the series were never a priority, but since the company has obviously started caring about streaming a lot more, I think they're putting more effort into what they're actually producing. So I think I would trust them to make a series for this. I think it would fit well. I'd rather see little stories than just one big mass. Like, they're back. It would be kind of cool to have different stories to see how the characters are evolving and the story continuing.
Yeah. Well, I'm all for more of this one, because it does have a very special place, because it feels like a hidden gem. It feels like a special movie to you and to me as well, because it's one that doesn't get talked about a lot. It's not the modern day ones like Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin, and you know, even more modern day like Frozen and Moana and Zootopia. It's not old school like Pinocchio and Dumbo and Snow White. It's this weird place like the Black Cauldron and you know, and Oliver and Company, where I feel like those were the days where I was really into these movies. And yet they weren't really producing at their highest quality at that time, and yet I still seem to love them. And I mean, I love the live action ones they did at the time, like Tron and Black Hole, which I would not recommend those movies to most people because they're slow, and they're also very dated. But I feel like this one has a better shot at being something that people would pick up and watch. So to that
Especially,
end, I wanted to ask if you had anything else to share with it before I got your final opinions.
um, no, I'm ready.
Um, all right. Well, we ended up at 38 likes. So if we get 12 more, we'll open this. If not, we'll hold it off for another time. But I mean, who knows what this could be? This could be anything. This
I
could be
know, I want
Elsa,
it to be
Anna.
Sven.
You want it to be Sven? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we've watched this whole movie. We've talked about it. We watched some. I mean, we've kind of dug deep into this. We've gone deep in the plus on this movie. But the big question, Katie, would you recommend this movie?
Absolutely. As much as I think it's a little hard to watch because it's older and I don't know if an audience today would be as entertained by it as maybe I was as a kid, I think these characters are so memorable. They're very sensitive. They're easy to care about. I think the storyline is good. The story moves quick. I think the music is great. I think the cinematography is great. It has such a big Disney history to it. So many important people from the company worked on it, even though the film isn't as popular. So I definitely recommend. I think if you're a Disney fan and you haven't seen this film, it's short, it's easy to watch. It's just extra characters for you to love. 100% would recommend this film.
Gotcha. Well, I will say number one, we're getting a last minute scramble to the end for the likes. We have 43 likes right now, so you watch it for me, Katie, and see if we hit 50. But
Okay.
for me, I would recommend this movie too. This is like when I started this show, it was to go back into Disney Plus and look at things that people probably overlooked. This movie only cost 14 million at the box office. 14 million is nothing for an animated feature. It made 38 million at the box office, which tells me not a lot of people saw it, and that was back in 1986. So I'm going to assume that when people come to Disney Plus, they're going for Mandalorian, WandaVision, now Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or to watch Raya. So I think that you would very easily overlook this. If you start to search for it, it takes a couple like words to get into searching for it even to come up. So I think a lot of people are going to miss it, and I don't think they should, because it is one of Disney's full-length animated features. It doesn't tie into the parks, which is one of the criteria I usually carry. Like if you you have to watch it if you're a Disney fan. There's not really much for a specific Disney fan. There's not a ton of actors other than Alan Young who were associated with other Disney movies. There's not a ton of other, calls that go to the parks. So, it's just based on the movie alone. If you haven't seen this movie before, you should definitely check it out. It's a very short watch, an hour and 15 minutes, and it's packed with a lot of stuff. And I do think it stands the test of time. And I do think that the pacing is still good, that it wouldn't be too slow for you to watch. So
I agree.
47. Good Lord. That was pretty close.
I know.
Wow. We'll get them next time. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who joins us for Deep in the Plus. Go back and watch some of our other shows. Katie and I have reviewed a bunch of them. Check us out every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. We'll be here. We appreciate everybody that chatted along with us, especially our WIGS members. Thank you for everything you do for us. We love talking to you in the chat, talking to you in the Discord. So thank you guys for everything. We're very excited for you, Katie, that Disneyland, the Touch of Disney is there. Disneyland's opening up very soon. I'm sure you'll be there reporting and, just working super hard to bring us all kinds of information from the parks.
Of course.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a great night, and we will see you next time.